Welcome to another episode of the Can't Deposit Excuses podcast. I'm your host, Derek Wiley. So excited today to have a guest that has been here before, but his episode was corrupted due to memory card issues, just like one of our other guests. So Daniel Colston, so glad to have you back. He also had given me a copy of his great book, The Money Success, a Step-by-Step Plan to Master Your Money, which previously I didn't have a chance to actually read, and now I've had a chance to peruse and go through it and look at some things. We'll be able to talk about it. But Daniel, thanks for coming on. Glad to have you.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So like I said, we've done this once before, but technology being what it is, sometimes you have technical snafus. In our case, it was a faulty card reader that ate our cards. So we have to, start over and re-record the podcast. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this for a second time. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for those that don't know Daniel's story, he actually has a pretty interesting one. Not only does he have this great book, and he's a certified financial planner, which is obviously, pretty cool stuff, and we'll get to that. He kind of came to the financial services field through a roundabout way. He started in the ministry, and that's kind of, where you learned, I think, from our prior conversations to really interact with people and kind of got a love for wanting to help people. And there's many different ways to help people. Ministry is one of those ways, but there's other ways, and you found a way to do that, obviously, through helping people plan their finances, which can, of course, change their lives. So I wanted to just get into that and start off by asking you, tell me the backstory, like, where did it begin, and how did you eventually get over to what you're doing now? But tell me the backstory before now.
Yeah, so I knew when I was a junior in high school that I loved God, I loved the ministry and helping people, and I was told that I was good at preaching, so I was like, hey, I guess this is it, I want to go into this. So I went to Bible college and studied preaching, counseling, and camp ministry, which is kind of fun and funny because I also worked for a local Christian camp here in Fincastle for 5 summers. And so that had a huge impact on me as a teenager. So I came back to Roanoke after getting my undergrad in Bible and theology, and was a bank teller for a year and a half, and then got a youth pastor position, and was a youth pastor for 6 years. And I loved it, loved working with the kids, and would preach on the Sunday after Christmas when the pastor was on vacation. Would preach to the congregation, and would preach sunrise service on Easter and things like that. And really loved that, and working with kids. We go to camp in the summers and retreats and things. So I loved that, did my time for 6 years. Also got my Master's of Divinity, studied Greek and Hebrew and all that. That was not just like a Master of Arts, 36 credits. It was 93 credits. So it was just like massive.
You put a lot of time into that.
A lot of time. So 8 years of formal education in Bible and theology. And so I felt like I was an expert in Bible and theology, but no one was, blowing up my phone asking for theology advice. And so I was looking to make a change and found financial planning and realized if I master this, people will be banging down my door and blowing up my phone asking for financial advice, and they'll pay me really well to do it. So I got into financial planning, went to school for that. I got my CFP, Certified Financial Planner credential, which there's a 50% pass-fail rate on that. So, and you can only take the exam if you've done the education. So people who've done the education still, half of them fail.
Yeah.
So did that, and I've been doing financial planning a little over 3 years now, and I just love helping people. A lot of times people's life decisions and life just really tough times or really meaningful, impactful times, it's tied with their money. And so I'm able to help people through marriage, divorce, loss of a loved one, loss of a parent, getting an inheritance, starting out, planning for retirement. And I feel like there are dozens and dozens of clients who really depend on me day to day and trust me and really depend on my advice to help them function in their day-to-day because of their finances. So it's a very impactful, meaningful career for me.
Yeah, very rewarding. And you're not the first person, I don't think, that's ever made the transition from ministry to financial planning. And there's other people that, kind of have a combination of the two, where they realize how they can change people's lives, at least through money and through sound financial practices and knowledge. Dave Ramsey, probably the most famous person that has a tie to trying to use, his programs to teach people about financial literacy. Because that's really the biggest issue, I think, is there's just a lack of financial literacy literacy. We start talking about investing and things, and people are like, I don't know the first thing about it. And it's because, unfortunately, there's no formal requirement in our educational system to teach people about personal finance. We teach them all kinds of other things that may or may not be useful later on in life, but one of the most important things that you could ever learn is how to handle your finances, master your money. If you're blessed enough to come from a family that has taught you those things, then that's fantastic, and hopefully they'll pass down some of that information. But for the vast majority of people, they just lack a basic knowledge because no one's ever talked to them and no one's ever sat down with them. And so I think the hope, I think you would agree, the hope is that if you do sit down with somebody, you happen to sit down with somebody who actually has your best interest at heart. I know the last time we spoke, we talked about the fact that you're a fiduciary and that responsibility. And for those that may be listening, and maybe I'll let you elaborate on that, can you kind of explain to people what that means when I say you have that fiduciary responsibility to your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you pack so much into like a paragraph or 3 paragraphs. So there's like a lot to unpack there. And it's so true that people just don't know what they don't know. And financial literacy is such a problem in this country. And there's a lot of people in the financial services industry who would call themselves an advisor. And really, they just passed an easy exam and then they started selling a product, but they aren't actually giving good advice. And so I'm able to sit down with people and help them and really give them comprehensive, ethical, knowledgeable advice that in their best interest. That's the key word. So when we talk about fiduciary, which is this really long word that starts with an F, and people are like, what does that mean? It's kind of a weird sounding word. But it's based on the Latin word fide, which means faith. So if I am your advisor, I'm your fiduciary, you're placing faith in me that I will, do right by you. So a fiduciary has a legal obligation to give advice in the best interest of the client, which you would hope that every advisor or person who calls himself an advisor gives good advice, like that, that should just be, basic level, but unfortunately it's not. And there's a lot of legal work that Congress is trying to do to pass to say, hey, if you're in the financial services industry, you have to give good advice.
Yeah, they had to do a lot of that here recently. It seems like in the last several years, make that fiduciary responsibility not second hand, but actually the priority is to give that advice because, like you said, the goal should be to give the client the advice that's in their best interest. But for years in the industry, there were some people that were held to that fiduciary standard, but there were other people that were not held to that standard. And so their standard was whatever would enrich them the most was the product that they sold. It may not be in the client's best interest, but it was in their best interest. And so that's kind of a thing I think it's, from my understanding is it's changed a lot. And so most people should at this point have that fiduciary responsibility, but everybody knows that just cut on your television, read a newspaper, look online. There's still to this day people that are not upholding that fiduciary responsibility to their client and not giving them advice that's in their best interest, but rather enriching themselves through their clients. So, yeah.
It's funny you mentioned fiduciary. I had a prospective client meeting yesterday, and I'm pretty sure she's going to become a client after she goes home and talks to her husband. And I have this little sheet that I give in those meetings. There's 5 areas where I can initial, and it says, what is a fiduciary? And then 5 key areas. And so I initial each one, then I sign it at the bottom. And I say, if you take this into a bank or one of my competitors, a broker-dealer, one of these big national firms with a headquarters in wherever, I'm not going to pick on anybody because I have friends in all these industries.
Let's just say Nebraska because everything's in Nebraska. We'll just pick like Nebraska and we'll say if it's in Omaha because we'll just pick that. I'll pick on that place just because everything's based in Omaha, Nebraska. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, you're just not in the financial services business, go look sometime and see how many places are based out of Omaha. But.
We'll just say Omaha. We won't pick on Warren Buffett at all. So her face was just lighting up. She was just smiling as I was going through this page with her because she was realizing Daniel actually has my best interests at heart. And I had a legal pad with all of these issues she needed help with. And she was beginning to realize I had the knowledge and the competence and the ethics and was going to help her and give her advice in her best interests and wasn't going to push any particular product. And I could just see the smile, lighting up on her face. And it felt so good to see that she got it. Because a lot of people, may not understand or what is this word fiduciary? So it is kind of a weird word.
Yeah. I noticed this thing too, and I don't know if you've noticed this. I noticed in my business. Have you noticed that there's a certain subset of people that maybe won't ask questions? It's actually the set of people that you would think would ask the most questions. What I found is the people that maybe aren't as have as much formal education, etc. Like they're happy to ask questions and to be advised. But people that maybe have a little bit more education, they tend to think they're supposed to know things. And so rather than be honest and say, I don't understand this, or I don't get this, or Daniel, can you explain this to me in terms that I can understand? They almost fake that they know it. It's like the kid in the class that won't raise his hand, and then when the test comes, he fails, and you're like, well, why didn't you ask questions? It's because he didn't want to look like he was an idiot. And the answer is, don't feel bad that you don't know the answers to some of these most basic questions, no matter what your education level is, what your job title is, what you do for a living, because there are plenty of people that do super complicated stuff, and they're a technical expert at what they do. But if you've never had anybody to walk you through this stuff, then you're not going to know it. I don't care if you have a master's degree. I don't care if you have an advanced degree. If you're an engineer, if you're, a doctor, a lawyer, you may not know all the intricacies of the financial system because it's not your area of expertise. But I just have always found how interesting it is that, and in fact, I found also a lot of times people that don't have as much education or as many assets, they will be much more concerned about how can I learn and put to work the plan that my financial planner has put forward. Where meanwhile, the person that thinks they know everything is like, well, I can just do this all myself, and I'll just go and open up an online brokerage account, and I can do just as good as anybody else. But there's some benefit to having a financial planner beyond just the X's and the O's. It's also the coaching when you have a difficult decision to make that comes along. It's nice to have someone to bounce those ideas off of. So what's your take on the difference between different people and how they view what you do, and maybe trying to do too much or maybe not doing enough as a result of the, what do we say, overconfidence, I guess I'd call it.
Yeah, I definitely see some people who are like afraid to ask questions because they don't want to appear stupid or whatever. And I'm like, there are no stupid questions. And like you said, I have doctors and lawyers that I work with and I've seen and they, nothing about a person's occupation or their net worth or anything, because I've seen it all. I've seen all the balance sheets is indicative of how much they know about financial services and about money. So I like to take an educator approach. Mm-hmm. So everyone that sits across the seat from me, I explain how everything works. Here's how fees work. Here's what basis points are. Here's why you should have stocks and bonds and precious metals and all these things. And here's what you can expect in retirement. And here's the IRS tax laws. And so that's a lot of the value that I add, versus just, a person could put their money in a brokerage account and let it roll and see what happens, but then they aren't taking into thought like the tax ramifications of that, and also the IRS laws, and it's very complex. I had someone who wanted to do a Roth conversion recently, and I'm like, well, yeah, you can do this, and we'll do a comparison, but if you convert this entire account right now, that's going to increase your income tax bracket, and then you're going to owe not only taxes on more, but at a higher rate. So it's going to mess up kind of your entire financial plan. And so just knowledge is power. And so, I see all kinds of clients, people who only have a little and they're just starting out and they're hungry for knowledge, and people who also have a lot of assets and they're just as hungry for knowledge. And ideally, I'll never work myself out of a job. I don't want to, teach someone so well that they're just like, okay, well, we'll fire you as an advisor. We don't need you anymore. But like you said, there's a reason that I do specialize in things, just like doctors and lawyers and landscapers and painters specialize in what they do. So I would never, follow around an electrician and then think that, oh, I can now I can wire a building for electricity. Just like, my clients who spend enough time with me, I will educate them on how everything works, but that won't necessarily make them a specialist.
No. Yeah. I think we all know that. Like, we can go and get some basic education online and try to do some things. And could we do an okay job Possibly, it depends on how much time you put into it. I mean, you can teach yourself to do just about anything. One of the things you taught yourself how to do was to redo a van. We'll get to that later. If anybody follows Daniel on social media, he just outfitted a van to go and do some traveling in, and it's really cool. So we'll talk about that. But, you can teach yourself how to do anything, but the answer is like, are you the most competent? Are you the best? I mean, it's like I can go out and like watch a video on how to play basketball, but does that mean I have Phil Jackson level coaching abilities? No, obviously not.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the difference that I see. I just always have noticed that people tend to, sometimes get overconfident in their abilities or have underconfidence. And I just find it interesting how I'll have clientele, even in my business, that, ask a ton of questions and don't have a lot of assets. Meanwhile, I have someone with a ton of assets that just assumes that they know everything, and they'll talk to me as if they're the expert. And sometimes I just want to be like, well, do you want to come do my job? Because it seems like you know more about what I do than I know. And it's just interesting to me how certain people view it that way. And it's not everyone. It's not like across the board, everyone that has a high net worth or has a lot of assets is like that. I just find there's more people like that. And I think it's, they're trying to, overcompensate because they don't want to appear like they're not knowledgeable. And I'm like, you should never try to overcompensate when it comes to your finances to appear not knowledgeable or to appear more knowledgeable than you really are, because you're only doing yourself a disservice. Much better to ask a lot of questions and to get educated. But moving on, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your book, because one of the things, the podcast is You Can't Deposit Excuses, Can't Deposit Excuses podcast. And one of the things that I talk about all the time, and I think this is kind of a driving force, and you have a sub piece in your book, one of the little, not necessarily a chapter, but a heading piece, talks about knowing your why and how that's important. I would assume that knowing your why probably is the basis for most of the financial planning that you do with your clients. So you try to get to that question. So I just wanted to ask you, why that's so important and how you advise clients, to think about that, what their why might be.
Yeah, it's so vital. Like I do more than just make rich people richer. That to me would have no, value. Like that's not my why. Oh yeah, I'm a financial advisor, just make rich people richer. So in financial planning, I ask my clients, what do you need money for? Because that helps us get to that magic number of like, what's that magic number you need for retirement? Because, some people say it's $1 million, some people say it's 750,000, some people are like, no, you need 1.5. Like, it's different for each person. You don't know if they have their mortgage paid off or what kind of lifestyle they want, or if they want to buy a condo at the beach. So, knowing your why is so important, because if you're just stacking up dollars and dollars and dollars in your bank accounts and your investments, but you don't know what you want to do with it, it's kind of it beyond the point of having an emergency fund and having security. What's the point of the other dollars in your bank accounts? It's got to lead to something. So I always ask clients, what do you want to do with your life?
Yes, it's a good question.
It's a big question, really big question. I mean, they think they're coming to me just for financial advice, but we're going to get to psychological, life goals, life coaching, all of that as well. And I have couples in my office who look at each other and they've never had these conversations with themselves before, and I'm like, well, this is important, because if I grow your money to X amount of dollars and then y'all go a different direction, then okay, great. I guess you just have this extra money for your kids. That's great. But I have clients who also don't have kids, and so that's a conversation piece as well. So so if a client is no longer married, or their spouse has died and they have no kids, and they have a big net worth, what's the plan there? So knowing your why is so vital. I think, in America, we're so distracted by marketing, and trillions of dollars is spent on marketing every year. We're kind of slaves to our phones and Instagram and everything and I get that these companies are trying to get your money because that's why they exist. So, I can't blame the marketing companies. I'm in marketing, I guess, or sales as well. I'm trying to get clients as well. So you can't blame them. But I think as consumers, a lot of times we get caught up in, I need this, I need that, I need that. Like, I didn't know I needed it till I got on Instagram and I saw that ad. Yes. And now I have to have it. And so that consumer mentality just is pervasive, and everyone has this idea of, I need the next flashiest thing. And that might work for 2 or 3 years for the psychological reward, but after that wears off, like, what's your why?
Yeah.
So it's so important.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think the part of, and this has come up on other podcast episodes, the why piece. I know in some of my early episodes we talked about this, but I think the reason the why is so important is you need an emotional attachment to your why in order for you to actually succeed in whatever your goals are. If you don't have an emotional attachment and investment in whatever that why is, then yeah, the whole idea of stacking up dollar bills in an account kind of loses meaning, and you probably lose focus on what's necessary to actually achieve those goals. So you need to have something that has an emotional resonance. Maybe it's, I want to leave my family in a better position than I'm in. Maybe it's, I want to own a beach house. Maybe it's, I just want to get out of debt. Maybe it's, I want to be able to send my kids to college. I mean, everybody's why is going to be different, and there is no right or wrong. But what's most important is you have emotional attachment to it. One of the things you kind of already transitioned to, another thing I was going to talk about, you got to it right there, which was stop wasting your money on dumb things, which is another piece in your book that you talk about. I think there was a piece in there talking about realizing like a magazine subscription had been on your account for like, apparently several months, or you had a charge. It was like you got a free magazine subscription at some point in the past, and then all of a sudden you were like, what is this charge? Oh, that was that free magazine subscription, because of course it's only free for like a year or two. Then it's like a $24.99 charge, and you're like, and we all have stuff like that probably that we've spent money on, and people don't pay close attention to their finances. And that doesn't seem like a lot, but if you have enough, especially in this day and age, everything is, automated, like set it and forget it, your Netflix, your Hulu, your whatever. If I went through my credit card statement, I can guarantee you there'll be something I'll find on there that I'm like, oh, I'm still paying for that. I forgot about that. Well, that's the idea of the marketing. You get set up, and then you forget, like, oh, I've got that $7 charge, that $8 charge. I'm sure there's people out there that there's an extra $100 in their budget every month if they just realized they've signed up for some subscription that they totally forgot about. So, yeah, when you mention like be careful about wasting your money on dumb stuff, like the next shiny object, that's something that's that I think is in our culture, unfortunately, is pretty pervasive. And we see a lot of that, using money on dumb things.
Yeah, it's so true. And, for me, I'm all about total return. So, these people brag about like, ooh, I like, for instance, I put not me, but let's say a person brags about, I put $1,000 in Tesla last year. Now it's $2,000. I doubled my money. Okay, well, what if, probably every consumer has Amazon, you're talking about video streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, and Disney Plus. Mm-hmm. So you add all those up, it's like $60 a month. So that's like $720 a year. And then how many times do you eat out versus, buying groceries and fixing yourself a sandwich? And I'm the worst at this. So, let's just take those two things. Maybe you cut out Starbucks, once a week or whatever. So all of those things, that adds up to like $4 or $5 grand a year. Mm-hmm. So people are bragging about, ooh, I doubled my money on Amazon. Well, what if you just, were more intentional with your lifestyle? You could say you quadrupled your return, like that. Yeah, that it's great to 2x your money. And it's rare. I mean, not last year. Last year was, kind of.
Last year was a weird year. Depends on when you got into the market last year. If you got into the market in April of last year and then rode it till now, you probably are still feeling pretty good. But, but it was an interesting year last year, no doubt. I mean, you're making an excellent point, which is all the things we spend money on that we don't think about that can easily add up to real dollars and cents. And plus, if you take someone that's young and you use the power of compounding interest, or compounding returns over time, whether it be interest or whether it be in the markets, people don't, like that's something like I learned about compounding. I remember exactly where I was. I was at VMI, and I was actually in a military science class. Army, I took Army ROTC, and I wasn't taking a commission. And so if you didn't take a commission, when you went for your lab, we had class, we had a formal class, and you had lab. And so early on, your lab would be like doing land navigation and doing these things out in the field, like, learning how to read maps, and maybe it's, out, shooting guns or whatever the case may be. But then towards the latter half, if you weren't going to take a commission, then you would go to like a lab and you would talk about like real world stuff. And your lab might be like resume writing. It might be financial services. I remember they had a representative from a major financial services company come in and talk to us. But one of the things they talked about was compounding interest. And here I am, I guess I'm a junior in college, never even heard the term, had no idea what it was. And if it wasn't for having been in that course, I would never have heard the term until later in life. But they started showing like, $100,000 at 10%, it's 110. And then the next year, that 110 at 10% is 121,000. And then, you get up to $500,000, 500 becomes 550 at 10%. 550, once again, now you're up to over 600,000. So you see, like, once the number starts to grow, it really exponentially takes off. But those little Starbucks coffees, I'm not saying you have to live like a pauper and not enjoy life. Like, enjoy life. You don't have to. What's the TLC show where they literally reuse bathwater?
I've seen that.
I'm not advocating anyone.
People are crazy, man.
I'm not advocating anyone take anything to the extreme of reusing their bathwater. That's just gross.
Yeah, and like the t-shirts with all the holes in them. They'll wash their t-shirts in the sink.
Yeah. I mean, you can still live life. You don't have to go that far. But if you do cut out some of those smaller things, it's amazing how that adds up. I'm sure you've seen that firsthand.
Yeah, it's huge. And I mean, just imagine if you would save that $5,000 a year, that's $5,000 more you could invest and then get the compound interest on that. So it's like, there's also like an opportunity cost. And also that's $5,000 that you had to earn and pay taxes on. So it's actually more like $7,000. So it's crazy when you look at it like that.
Oh yeah, it's nuts when you start to look at the numbers and you realize, like, man, we waste so much money on things. And trust me, I'm like guilty as well. Like, I was the other day, we were doing baseball. My kids are playing baseball right now, so we've got practice 5 days a week. I've got baseball Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then t-ball Tuesday, Thursday. Trust me, there are days where it's like we're ordering to go. Like, we don't have time to fix dinner. We're so busy. We try to plan our meals ahead of time, but that's just the nature of life, that sometimes that happens. But the more that you can control that, it's amazing, how you can find money in your budget to save and to put towards different things and to put towards that why, that goal, which transitioning, because I want to come to this, talking about whys. I don't know if this is one of your whys or not, but clearly you love to travel. So this van, I want to talk about this van. So you got this van that you just finished doing. So the last time we spoke, I didn't know the van was like near completion. So you've actually completed this van project. Anybody that has seen these YouTubers online and stuff, van life and all this, I've seen it. I just didn't know, how prevalent it was. So tell me about this van and how you came to take a van and literally transform the inside of it to make it like a home. It's like a little mini RV or whatever. So tell me about why you did it, how long it took, what the whole project was like, because to me it's cool.
Yeah, thanks, man. I'm so excited. So I bought this van 5 months ago, and it's the biggest model you can buy. So it's the Ford Transit T250 high roof extended length.
Okay, let me take some notes here. It's the Ford Transit T250, just in case. I don't know what the future might hold. I don't know if it can fit a family of four or not, but I'm going to be watching these pictures as they come out. All right, so I've got it down. All right, go ahead.
Yeah. And I see these everywhere I go now. Well, not the high roof extended length. I see the regular Transits. So you can get a medium, regular roof, medium roof, high roof. I got the high roof, and then the extended length. So there's another 18 inches past the wheel well. So it's the biggest one you can get. So I put a bed in there, a raised bed that's 36 inches off the ground, so that way I can fit my bikes underneath. And I put a kitchen sink, cabinets below the kitchen countertop, and then above, and put in a backsplash and mattress, and then wood ceiling and wood on the walls. So yeah, it's I'm so excited. So
now here's the question.
Yeah.
How does a certified financial planner with a background in ministry learn how to trick out a Sprinter van? Like, how did you come to do this?
Yeah, I've always wanted to do it. So, and I've always loved camping and hiking and exploring the national parks and things. So I was like, hey, and I've also into a painting business on the side since 2016. painting houses and things, which I'm doing a lot less of that now because I make more in financial planning now. So don't, none of you who are watching, give me a call to come paint your house. Unless I can review your portfolio as well, then I'll do it. But yeah, no, people love to have me come paint their house because I'm cheaper than the competition, and I'm not like drunk or, smoking weed while I'm painting their house. So.
These stereotypes, they must exist for a reason, unfortunately, for a lot of these industries. But yeah, so
anyways, yeah, I can work with my hands. I looked a lot of stuff up on YouTube, followed a bunch of blogs, and the van conversion I ended up doing is kind of a mix of 3 different layouts that I followed.
So the answer is you can learn to do a lot of things by watching YouTube videos, which I agree with. I finished a basement by watching YouTube videos. I had some experience with my hands as well doing different projects, and I had done like a bathroom remodel at our old house and done some things, and then just like I decided I'm going to take on like the entire basement. Of course, at the time that I took the project on, it's like any project, I'm sure the van project, you have no idea what you're getting yourself into. You've got in your head this thought of, well, it's going to take this long, I'm going to do this, and it always takes way longer and costs way more than what you anticipated when you first started because there's always these unforeseen things that come up that you weren't expecting. So it's kind of an adventure to do it. And then, of course, you have a sense of accomplishment once you're done. And now that you're done, what's the plan with the van? Where are you going? Like, where are you going to take this thing to? Where are you going to go travel and see?
Yeah, so I plan on doing a whole lot of weekend trips around Virginia. I love Grayson Highlands State Park and the Abingdon area in far southwest Virginia. And I love the Charlottesville area, Shenandoah National Park, and the Virginia Beach area. So I'm going to do a whole lot of weekend trips, Saturday, like Friday through Sunday type deals. And then make sure the van is functioning properly, do several, close to home, and then do like hit all the national parks, 2 weeks, go out west. Yeah. And then typically I want to travel north in the summer and south in the winter. So that way I can kind of temperature control sleeping in the van and things.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I plan to take showers and use the bathroom at Planet Fitnesses all across America and truck stops and things like that. So
don't set off the lunk alarm when you go in there into the showers. You'll make them upset there at the Planet Fitnesses. No, I mean, that's a great idea. But like you said, keep it close to home to start. You don't want to get yourself, 15 hours away and then find out, man, I thought I was really good at doing all these upgrades to this van, but apparently I missed a step here or there, like when you get done putting that project together and there's a box of leftover screws, you don't want to be that guy and be like, oh, I'm too far away now to fix it. So I think you've got a good plan there. Well, let me ask you this. And like I said, if you guys aren't already, if you follow Daniel, if you see his social media, he's had the van on there, and I knew he was doing it. I should know it was done. It's really cool. So I encourage you to look him up. And at the end, we'll talk about that. We'll make sure you can find out where you can reach him and where you can contact him, because the van is neat.
Thank you.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, there were some things we talked about last time. There was a story I saw the other day, and I think you might have been, I don't know if you brought it up or we just talked about it in passing. I can't remember, but like the wash sale rule. So anybody that doesn't know about this, Daniel and I, last time we got together, we talked a little bit about cryptocurrency. We talked a little bit about just different things that interest us. And one of the things I saw the other day, there was this guy that bought and sold the same, I think it was a stock. I'm not sure it was cryptocurrency in his case, but he bought and sold it repeatedly. He ended up having like an $800,000 tax bill. As a certified financial planner, we want to make sure our listeners are educated to things they should be aware of. So what would you tell somebody that keeps buying and selling Tesla stock over and over again? What one of the things they may want to be aware of that could happen if they keep doing that?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's huge. And in that case, that guy had only made $45,000.
Yes, that was the story. Yes.
So, if you're making $8 million, yeah, you can pay $800,000 of tax, but he only made $45,000, but owed $800,000, and it was because because of the wash sale rule, which he was not aware of, which is if you sell a stock for a loss, you can't buy back into the same position within 30 days and still claim the loss. So he clearly had, like, I guess if he made $45,000, he had $845,000 gains and an $800,000 loss, or however it worked out. It's not going to be like that exactly, but so because of the wash sale rule, he ended up owing $800,000 worth of tax. Basically, he didn't know what he was doing. He thought, oh, I'm just going to sell it when it's high, buy it when it's low, and he tried to time the market, and was successful enough to make 45 grand, but it was a net loss to him of $755,000 simply because he thought he knew what he was doing, but he didn't.
And he couldn't take the write-off or the loss as a result of the fact that he kept doing this over and over again. So I think the lesson to be learned from this is you need a certified financial planner. You need someone like Daniel. It's cool that Robinhood exists. It's cool that Webull exists. If you are playing the stonk market with all the kids, which is fun to do with the AMCs and the GameStops, also be aware like there are actual tax consequences to buying and selling the same shares over and over again. And if you don't know what you're doing, you can find yourself in a precarious position with the IRS come tax time, just like this guy did. It's crazy. $45,000 is all that he made, but he has an $800,000 tax bill. Like, that's one of the craziest stories you'll ever hear in terms of someone just like repeatedly doing something and not fully understanding what they were getting into. And that's what's happened in the market, I guess. I remember when I opened up my first account personally, it was with, I think, Scott Trade years ago, and like trades were like $21.95 per trade. So, you wouldn't buy like a couple of shares. Like, you had to buy some shares because you didn't want to have to pay that, $21 when you bought and $21 when you sold, $42. But now with everything being no fees, pretty much all brokerages across the board, and then you had and Robinhood being the one that kind of led that path. Now there's so many that have gamified investing, like Webull and Robinhood. Like, I think on Robinhood you like buy stock and the like confetti falls on your phone, and like they celebrate you, and it's like it feels really cool if you're young, and it's good that it's getting people interested in investing. But the downside of that is if you don't know what you're doing, you can put yourself in a bad spot. It sounds like this guy did.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if he had just consulted someone like me before he did all that, he could have done all of that in a retirement account and it wouldn't have mattered. But because he was doing it in a brokerage account, he's liable for those taxes. Whereas in a retirement account, you're not. So until you make the withdrawals, and if it's a Roth, it would be completely tax free, when he takes the money out in retirement. So, yeah, and I mean, knowledge is power. So, yeah, people are always doing whatever they want to do. And I know this year, at the beginning of this year, with GameStop stock and sundial growers and all of that, people have been doing a lot of the buying and selling, selling at the peak and buying at the dip. And so they're going to get hit come tax time for 2021 taxes. So you should always consult with an advisor. A lot of people think you can do it yourself. Sometimes you can, but sometimes you get burned.
Well, it's always nice too. I mean, I'm sure you would agree, like if you have an advisor, it doesn't mean you have to talk to your advisor about everything that you do. You can have your own account that you play around in or do whatever in, but at least, number one, you have your advisor to help talk to you about your major overall goals, your reasons why. Talk about maybe the big accounts like your retirement accounts, your accounts for your kids' college fund, etc. But then if you wanted to have an account on the side, you can play with it. And I don't need to necessarily call you before I make every move. But if I'm starting off, at least I'd have that person to rely on until I actually learned the basics before I go and play with maybe a little bit of a side investment account, a little brokerage account. Be like, well, I should ask Daniel, like, well, how does this work? Because it's nice to have that expert that you can rely upon to ask questions of. So, let you handle the big stuff. And if you want to have a little bit of money to play around with, that's fine. But you can hurt yourself if you don't know what you're doing. I think that's the lesson to be learned from that story. And it stuck out for me because the last time you were here, we talked about it. So I wanted to make sure we touched on that again because I think that's kind of shows the value of what it's like to have someone in your corner that's an expert on this stuff. It can come in handy. Don't think you can do it all yourself because this guy thought he could do it all of himself. And, unfortunately, he's I don't know how that works. I don't know. He'll get on a payment plan, I guess, over time, either that or I don't even want to begin to imagine what that's got to be like with an $800,000 tax bill. But I guess, he'll figure it out eventually. Well, before we wrap up, one of the things I like to do towards the end of every episode is ask the guests that come onto the podcast, the title is Can't Deposit Excuses. And that has a lot of meanings. And we've talked about a lot of things that, people should think about when it comes to investing, talking about their reasons why, talking about how you made the transition from ministry into financial services and what you're trying to do to help better people's lives. What does that phrase mean to you when you hear can't deposit excuses? What does it bring to mind?
Yeah, I love that title because it's very poignant and kind of the imagery I see is like me walking into a bank trying to make a deposit and trying to deposit an excuse, and it's like they won't accept an excuse because like an excuse is good for nothing. Like you can't deposit it, you can't sell it, you can't use it. Like it's, so don't come up with excuses, just come up with results and go after it and have goals. And I think that's great, and it says so much in those 3 words about your goals for life and business and success.
Yeah, you don't want to end up at the end of your life, I guess. This was my take on it, especially when it comes to what you do for a living. You don't want to end up at the end of your life or at the end of your working career and then not have thought about these bigger questions, your why and how you're going to achieve that. And whether it be financial goals, whether it be life goals, whether it be fitness goals, whatever it is, you don't want to get to a point where you look back and say, well, I didn't get all these things done because every time I had an opportunity to take a step in the right direction, I found a reason why or rationalized an excuse as to why I couldn't do those things. So, all of us are going to have things that come up in our lives, but hopefully in the long run, we figure out more times than not to take the step in the right direction to try to figure out how to accomplish those goals versus the reasons why we can't accomplish them. So I think you kind of nailed it. That was my take on it too. So I love it. That's the reason I named the podcast that, because when I first saw that phrase, it spoke to me. So I'm glad that it speaks to most of our guests too. Well, Daniel, how can people that listen to our podcast, watch the podcast, get in contact with you? Like, where can they find out more information about you? Maybe a website, social media, etc. I'm going to let you drop that knowledge on them, and then that way they'll know how to reach out to you if they want to learn more information about what you do and how you can help them.
Yeah, thanks. So probably the easiest way to get in contact with me is Google my name, Daniel Colston, Financial Advisor, and my website will come up, which is americanfp.us, and that stands for American Financial Planning, the company I'm at. And I have a blog there. I write weekly or bi-weekly, and you can also follow me on Facebook, Daniel Colston, or Instagram, D Colston, Twitter, the same.
And we'll try to put some of these links down in the show notes at the bottom, so that way people can kind of find you and follow up with you, because I think that they'd be well served to at least have a conversation with you and see, maybe you can give them some advice and start, leading them down a path to maybe figure out their future, so they're not stuck with a bunch of excuses at the end of the day, and they actually have some deposits there.
Literal deposits.
Literal deposits when push comes to shove. Well,
Yeah.
Daniel, thanks for being a guest. I really appreciate having you on, and I'm sure we'll do more in the future, because there's other things that I'd love to talk to you about, and we'll maybe have you on again at some point. But that wraps up another episode of the Can't Deposit Excuses podcast. Thanks, everybody. Please follow us on YouTube, like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.